My name's Ian Briggs from Plus Architecture. I'm presenting R.Iconic Stage 1. So the project summary, it's 31 stories, it has just under 2,000 square metres of retail, 5 townhouses, 3 bedrooms, 457 apartments of a mix you can see there. That includes 51 2-bed and 1-bed affordable housing apartments run and owned by Housing Choice Australia. And the brief that the client gave us in 2017 was one that was informed by his own personal health dedication. He's a very, very fitness freak type of guy. And also the client team studied long and hard and travelled to a number of places around Southeast Asia, Singapore and Hong Kong, cities like that, where families were known to be living in apartment buildings. And looking at what the apartment requirements had within them, as well as the communal facilities that supported a wide variety of people living in these types of buildings. So the location is at this interesting confluence of Williamstown Road, Normanby Road and Boundary Street. That in itself is really interesting as far as some of the distant as well as immediate views and aspects of the project. But when taken into account also the Fishermans Bend urban renewal area, which possibly is FIRBRA, at this interesting intersection between Sandwich and Montague, where, as we have seen over the last number of years, quite large-scale projects have been popping up here and there. But then at this knuckle point, everything not in red is pretty much limited to sort of 5 to 6 stories. So we have a location which is up to 31 metres at the time of this project getting approval, at this intersection of old Port Melbourne and South Melbourne and new Fishermans Bend. And as you can see there, it also intersected with this Howell Reserve and the that sort of linear park of the 109 light rail. And just for clarity, for some reason Howell Reserve turns into Fennell Reserve when it's immediately adjacent to our site on the other side of the road from Boundary Street. And just for, again, clarity, in the dotted lighter red is where the Stage 2 project will sit, which is not part of the presentation. So the site is bounded by Normanby, Boundary and Woodgate Street. The townhouses face onto Woodgate. There's major retail frontages facing onto Boundary and Normanby, entries, as you'll see shortly, right around the building, and the tower form sitting on a large podium. One of the critical aspects of the project, and again, Stage 2 is on the left, Stage 1, which we're discussing, is on the right-hand side, was the protection of the amenity of the immediate surrounds, and most vitally, Fennell Reserve, the park immediately to our south side. So you can see here in the early massing studies that we did, already there was this idea that we needed to somehow minimise or completely get rid of the overshadowing. And we did an enormous amount of work with authorities on what was deemed acceptable overshadowing and what was not. So this was the final result, which was September 22nd, 11 AM. We were permitted to overshadow that tree to the left-hand side of the pathway and that little bit of grass on the right-hand side down the bottom left corner. And then by 11:15, we could prove it was off, etc., running through. So that gave us an interesting sort of exercise where we thought, well, this project is at this incredible confluence of a number of these aspects, both of the planning scheme, as well as a road network, a vista, and we felt that there was an opportunity to not just build a sensible, I guess, from a feasibility envelope, but to really extend that up and use this site as a marker to end what will be in the future quite a significant row of tall towers running right back up to South Bank and the city beyond. And so the project became very much about how those tall towers stepped down, slanted down to both preserve the amenity of the park, but also to actually respect and signify that emergence of those tall towers down into the adjacent low-rise South Melbourne and Port Melbourne precincts. So there you can see quite clearly the stepping of the tall tower form, the way that it would bookend and turn the corner for those two large precincts of Fishermans Bend to the left and to the north of it, and then the way that it moves down and through into the lower rise forms of Port Melbourne. The architectural language then really picked up on that idea of this site being a confluence of the glassy towers on the top portion, talking about the new emerging character to its left-hand side, and then the brick masonry podiums talking to the older existing fabric of the surroundings. So the articulation of the tower, we wanted to keep it something very simple, but also scalable. So we had the 2 to 3 story recognition moving up through the glass tower. The ESD reports came back quite early, and they were quite influential in our approach of the design. So basically we were given the parameters to have 1/3 solid, 2/3 vision glass for living spaces when they're on the front facade, or 2/3 solid, 1/3 glass for bedrooms when they're on the facade. So we used that language of solid or spandrel glass to vision glass to create what we felt was something that would give an overall quality of tower form to the glass tower, but also just to, I guess, disguise and camouflage that inevitable stacking when you have a series of similar apartments stacking on top of each other and you get those long slots. So we have glass top brick base. Retail fronting onto the streetscape, mix of retail, office and commercial, and cafe. The building approaching from the park side. The podium itself was 3,000 square metres. It gave us an incredible opportunity to design spaces for families, for edible gardens, for sensory gardens. There was a shortcut devised between the light rail station just off to the left of the screen, through the podium at the back of Woodgate and up onto the podium deck and then into the tower, which has actually become almost the main entrance to the building. These pods were created originally as quite high-level spaces for some of the residents, but they become student study spaces predominantly, which is great. Pool families we see they're using all the time. The interior of the spaces for the apartments maximise storage. You can see there the minimising of the vision glass that gives it a far more domestic scale and feel rather than a lot of the glass towers you can see from the inside. But then capped out with some fairly large penthouses and residence communal facilities at the apex of the tower that you can see there in all glass at the top. Moving through the floor plan, so we have our major retail tenant, the Woolworths supermarket across the base there. The red arrows dictating the entries to the building in stage 1. Moving up through the podium, above ground car parking, typically the 3,000 square metre podium deck, fully landscaped with running tracks, dog tracks, children's facilities, young adult facilities, and then moving up through the tower and seeing how that cut plane affects the tower form as you move up through. So as I mentioned, heat loading is managed through the solid to glass facade. The gardens.
Yes, okay, sorry.